Welcome to Southwest Yard and Garden. I'm John White. Today we're going to be talking about one of the more popular windbreak and landscape trees in the Southwest, and that's the Arizona Cypress. The Arizona Cypress has been used in windbreak situations since probably the early 30s with the Dust Bowl era. There was a great push on putting in windbreak plantings to keep down soil erosion, and this is one of the plants that was used quite a bit in windbreak programs all over the West, and it is a real good tree. We see a lot of variation in them. There's a lot of genetic variation in them, as well as a couple different species out there. So we can see some that are very columnar, very tight, compact, and then others that are quite spreading and teardrop shape, and they can get quite a bit of size to them. So some of the older ones, they're easily 35, maybe even as much as 50 feet in width and 35 to 40 feet tall. So they can be quite large. They do have this beautiful gray-green color to them, which is really a pleasant sight in the landscape, kind of a variation off of the dark green. The tree uses less amounts of water than a lot of trees in our landscape, but the important thing is to give it adequate amounts of water as the tree is growing. So when it's planted in a windbreak situation like we have here, as that tree grows in size, you need to remember to expand the irrigation system so that the root system is being wet out to the distance that the roots are growing, and the roots are always going to be constantly expanding. So we want to make sure the tree does get an adequate amount of water. If it's put under stress, then a lot of times we have some insect problems move in, and that's one thing we want to talk about today is the cypress bark beetle. And that is an insect that's quite prevalent throughout the southern part of New Mexico, and really does a lot of damage and can end up in the death of the tree if nothing's done. So what we look for is we start looking at some of the tips on the tree, and we can see maybe where an end is missing, or we might have a piece where there's some dead tips that are laying on the ground or laying down on some of the foliage, and that's a sign that these are being eaten off. If you go to some of the tips, so a lot of times you can find a little hole actually in the end of them. There's one right here that has a little hole that goes right down into it. That's a sign that a bark beetle has been feeding on the tissue out here, and it doesn't attack it from the very tip. It kind of comes part way down, eats into the end, and then the weight of the branch causes it to break or lean over. So what we call that is flagging, and the dead tip just kind of hangs in the tree until eventually the wind or birds or people knock it off. But what we're looking at is the hole in the little end here, and as we begin to open it up, sometimes you can find the actual beetle in there. It will feed for a while, then it burrows its way back out and may move on to the trunk of the tree, and that's where it does its biggest damage. So if it does get into the trunk portion of the tree and starts eating its way up and down, creating some galleries in the wood, interfering with water uptake, nutrient uptake in the tree, then that's pretty much the kiss of death for the tree, because the tree does not recover from that. So if you are going to time insecticide spray, you want to use an insecticide that is labeled for use on ornamental trees. You want to time it with the movement of the beetle. So if you're starting to see some flagging on the tips, that's a sign that the beetle is out feeding on the tips of the plant. So we want to go in and time an insecticide treatment, and hopefully can get some good kill on it. We also want to look back at our cultural practices, and again make sure the tree is not under some kind of stress that is causing it to weaken where the beetles are coming in after the tree. So we want to be sure and eliminate stress problems as the tree grows out. So again, the first thing we look for is dead tips where this will just hang, and then if it's broken off, you'll see where it's been just kind of chewed off, and usually you'll see a hole going back a quarter inch or so back into the stem here, and that's a sign of a bark beetle. And of course, if it gets on the trunk, you'll have a major amount of sap oozing on the base of the tree. So again, that's something you want to look for and get under control. The last thing you might want to look for is spider mite, and you can just take a branch and bang it out on a white piece of paper out on your hand. And if you see some little dark red flecks moving around on your hand, or if you go to smear them and you get a smear mark on your hand or the paper, that's a sign that you have mites. And usually just a good washing with water will help to take care of the spider mite problem. So this is another problem that we see on cypress. So again, we want to kind of keep an eye on those. But again, it's a good tree for windbreak situations. Just allow it the room and be sure and give it the right cultural care. And the cypress will make a beautiful, long-lived tree for your landscape.